Welcome to another new lecture today. Today's topic is disposal of condemned carcasses. Though it is a general topic for the veterinarians also for the purpose of handling and disposal of dead and diseased animals, but here our main focus is about the condemned carcasses or animals in the slaughterhouse, even sometime before slaughter or after slaughter, or sometime animal may die, or sometime the after dressing carcasses may be condemned. So here we are going to discuss different methods. Some of them are more relevant for the dead animals in the field. The methods like composting, burial, incineration, landfill, or natural decomposition. These are the different methods. Briefly, I am going to discuss, and we will discuss about their advantages and disadvantages, and very briefly about some other solid disposal aspect. So disposal of dead animals, especially with disease, is very important for the safeguard of the human health, the environment, and to prevent the spread of disease to the animal or control of diseases. Proper disposal of carcasses is of utmost importance in preventing the spread of diseases, and as in case of anthrax, to prevent human infection. Carcasses should never be disposed of by depositing them in or near a stream of flowing water, because this will carry infections to downstream. An animal died of an infectious disease should not be allowed to remain longer in shades, as biting insects, rodents, etc. can reach and make a spread. Unless approved by veterinarian, it is not safe to open carcasses of animals that have died of a disease. All carcasses should be disposed of properly, either by burying or by burning or other suitable options, depending on the severity of the disease or nature of the disease. Here we can see the different methods for disposal of condemned carcasses. Here my lecture is more pertaining to the disposal of the condemned carcasses or dead animals in the abattoir, but this is equally important for veterinarians. Undergraduate syllabus, this portion is already there, but which I could not cover earlier, and this is also important for postgraduate students. The methods are like burial, composting, incineration, rendering, landfill, and natural decomposition. So all these methods I am going to explain very briefly in the today's lecture. Now the which method to follow. Choosing a right method for carcass disposal depends on several issues, as I already mentioned, depending on the potential for groundwater contamination or cost of fuel, availability of different facilities. Suppose we want to bury, there should be sufficient land for future use. The methods for carcass disposal vary, but especially with today's heightened biosecurity concern. This is important for depending on the management decision, but in case of abattoir, the most preferred method should be by rendering and making it more useful and economic. Before I go to discuss all the 6 methods I have listed there briefly, here is a brief details about the 3 important methods, that is rendering, burial, and alkaline hydrolysis, pertaining to particularly the condemned carcasses in abattoir. So regarding rendering, I already have 2 details lecture already earlier that should be studied and learned from that. So this is done by contacting with private rendering companies. Sometime animals that cannot be rendered include sheep, chicken, particularly feathers, and in case of fish, the scales. Sheep and chickens can be buried or cremated. Fish can be used for food, especially for dogs. In case of burial, contact district health department if you intend to bury animal carcasses. Particularly the veterinary department also should be involved, keeping in mind that carcasses should be buried at least 6 feet below the ground, and sufficient amount of lime and pesticide should be added. There is another third option, that is the alkaline hydrolysis. It is environmentally friendly and non-burn carcass disposal technology that destroys all pathogens including prions. So the lime use is very safe. The process hydrolyzes all biologic material, reducing all of the organic components to a sterile solution that is suitable for release to the sanitary sewage system. This effluent is also suitable as a fertilizer or as a feed in the biogas and biodiesel waste recycling applications. So first we will discuss about the method one by one. The first one is the Barial method, but this is mostly to be practiced at field condition for disposal of dead animals, which is not really recommended or practiced for slaughterhouse. Burial must not take place within 10 meter of a field drain, 50 meter of a water course, or 250 meter of a drinking water supply source. The burial site should be dry. Bury carcasses deep enough to prevent dogs and foxes getting access. Minimum 1 meter depth should be there to prevent this removal of the carcass. A location plan and a record of all buried animals must be kept so that in future, if at all required, we can trace them. Sometimes there is a prefabricated line disposal pits. Nowadays, this kind of special pits are available which can be used for small animals. But in this case, the lime should not be used. So this is briefly about the burial method, which is commonly used at the field level for the deceased and died animals. Now we will discuss about the second method, that is the composting. Composting can be defined as the stabilization of organic solid waste materials by microorganisms and fungi in aerobic moist conditions at elevated temperature. During composting, the readily biodegradable components of the waste are oxidized, leaving an organic residue which is also called humus, and it is relatively stable. Composting is a special form of aerobic decomposition in that metabolic heat generated by the microorganisms elevates the temperature of compost. So because of the microbial action, there will be heat generation, and that heat helps in better decomposition. The elevated temperature promotes the rapid decomposition also. So this is a very common practice for composting any waste material, organic material, and later it becomes very safe and organic material which can be used as a manure also. Now, advantages of composting. So it is more cost effective. There is not much cost involved in disposal, less effect on environment, automatically it gets decomposed and becomes safe. Low offensive odors because it is naturally getting decomposed with microorganism, so there will be no much offensive odors. Does not contain phytotoxic substances, destroy pathogens and most common weed seeds, and concentrated plant nutrients easily sprayed on cropland and marketed as soil conditioner. So this can be used as a manure and which can help in better plant growth or vegetables or horticulture. So the next method is incineration, that is the burning. Nowadays in modern technology there are electrically operated high power incineration facility. This incineration should be done within 12 hours of death. Ensure incineration takes place at the required temperature. So sometimes this temperature will be up to 1000 degrees Celsius or above. And incinerators burning more than 50 kg per hour. So that is the capacity or efficiency. In such case, it needs proper approval from the authority. So this is the modern incineration, but it can also be done by open burning, which I will discuss in the next. So the incineration method is more suitable in scientific establishment, in modern abattoir, or wherever there is proper large scale commercial establishment. Whereas there is other option, that is the open air burning. It is more suitable at the field level whenever the animal dies due to disease. So this should be located the firing place and possibly away from roads and houses as much far as possible, and Sometime we can have a shallow pit with a good air supply. And the first, at the bottom of the pit, we should have some fuel or wood or coal or some firewood. Over that we can place the carcass, but it should not be overloaded. We should ensure the complete combustion of carcasses. This whole act should be supervised, involving the use of fire. It is always risky, and there should be preferably facility for complete extinguishing, and a fire extinguisher and water supply should be available for emergency use. Now the next method is rendering. This is the most modern method followed in the commercial industry, wherever there is abatoir or even for disposal of the waste in big cities. I have details discussion in two separate video in YouTube. The first one in details about the rendering plant, and the second one is discussed about the processing method, how the processing happens in details. So please go back and learn from these two video lectures. Here I am just briefly going to mention few things. So rendering means heat processing. Carcasses may be rendered only by rendering plant with proper license, and as I have mentioned, the details can be learned from other places. Little brief I am going to tell in the next one. As I have mentioned, rendering is a more modern and technical method, commercially suitable. It can be off-site process, particularly in case of dead animal. Nowadays there is a concept that every district should have one rendering plant for processing of all dead animals and other waste. And this is a typically heat processing, making it safe, sterilized, and we can make different kind of byproducts meal like meat meal, bone meal, or sometimes meat cum bone meal. Here generally fat is separated at the last stage, and that is stored separately and used separately. The rendering can be two different types, which I have discussed in details in my earlier lectures. So one is called dry rendering, which can be a batch method or continuous method. In case of dry rendering, it is like a autoclave with double layer. The outer layer will have the steam and the inner layer will have the raw material for processing. There is another one that is called wet rendering, where the steam is directly injected. So this rendering process is a very large capacity. It needs very large boiler, so it needs proper safety measures. Here we can see the details flow of operation in a dry rendering plant, which I have discussed in details in my earlier lecture. So here it is a modern, more continuous method. So the materials are coming here, which is ground, and then sometime there will be metal detection. Then it is ground, and then it is loaded into the main cooker, that is the dry renderer. After cooking, the whole thing is taken out and the fat is separated in a percolating tank, and that fat goes to a fat storage tank, and the remaining solid cooked material, which will be very little moisture, that is again put through mechanical process, either centrifuge or fat expeller, to remove some more fat. And after that, this remaining fat-less material is further sometime dried, and then grinding is done and to get a meal. Now depending on the raw material, we can get meat meal or bone meal or meat cum bone meal. Sometimes even blood meal can also be prepared. But in this case, we are talking about the carcass utilization. So the whole carcass can be processed and we can make carcass meal. The next method is the land filling method. This is another way of disposing all the solid material, and also in case of condemned carcasses. So it will be far away from the residential area or the other habitant area. The landfilling means a process of disposal at a permitted facility where solid waste is permanently placed in or on land in compliance with rules adopted by the government. So this is a standard practice. With a proper government approval, a large low-lying area will be earmarked for landfilling, and all solid waste can be dumped there with proper procedure. Even the condemned animals or dead animals also. So carcasses may be disposed of at a privately or publicly owned landfill with prior approval of the local authority and the landfill operator. So this is how the dead animals are placed in a designated land and covered with soil, and slowly it will fill the low lying land. The last method is natural decomposition. Here the animals are left far away place for naturally to decompose. A livestock that dies on private or state rangeland from causes other than a significant infectious or contagious disease agent may be left to decompose naturally on that property as long as the carcass fulfills following conditions. So first one is it is at least 1320 feet away from any well, spring or body of surface water such as river, stream, lake, pond or intermittent stream. So any animal which is not having any serious pathogenic death can be left naturally to decompose in some designated land, private or government land with proper approval. So in continuation about natural decomposition, the other clauses like it is at least 1320 feet away from any residence not owned by the owner of the dead livestock animal. The third one is at least 1320 feet from any public roadway. The fourth one is out of public view. It should not be a common thoroughfare area where people can see this. And the last one is left to decompose on the land with the property owner's permission. There should be proper permission from the owner. So here the dead animals which is not having much serious pathogenic death can be left in a designated place for natural decomposition. So this natural decomposition is more suitable for natural death, but in case of slaughter and all, preferably we should have proper method of the company or the factory of its own. Here we will have a brief comparison about the advantages and disadvantages of the methods we have discussed. The first one is burial. The advantages are it is inexpensive, easy, biosecure and environmentally sound except for groundwater. The disadvantage is it needs a site selection critical, not appropriate in area of shallow water table, and aesthetics if improperly performed, and future stigma for the land. The second one, burning, again it is biosecure and inexpensive, but the fuel and labor is expensive, inappropriate for poultry, and there will be some smoke and odor, that is a potential disadvantage. In case of incineration, it is biosecure, concurrent use with debris removal, environmentally sound. It is fuel intensive, so cost is more, and technically difficult when debris is included, inappropriate for poultry. The next one is composting. This is environmentally sound, good for poultry, inexpensive, but not so biosecure, volume constraints, slow process. These are the disadvantage. And then last one is rendering. It is environmentally sound, biosecure and useful in products. So very economic use of the animal husbandry. Here the capacity constraints is there, biosecure concerns in transport and inappropriate for poultry. So this is briefly a comparison between the methods. So here we have a brief discussion about the solid waste treatment and disposal from the abattoir. As we have discussed earlier, during the slaughter process there will be many other solid materials other than the even condemned materials. There can be small pieces or small parts can be condemned and other non-edible materials. So altogether this is the solid waste which needs proper treatment and disposal, but almost the similar methods can be used. One is by rendering, then composting, sometimes recovery of valuable products, landfilling, incineration, pyrolysis, biodiesel production. So all this waste material can be used for biodiesel production or sometime anaerobic digestion and for the production of gas, useful gas, which can be used for fuel purpose. Here we can see a photograph with a continuous rendering. So here all the waste materials are put in one place. From there it is sucked through a inlet mechanism, and then step by step it go through processing, and finally valuable meals can be produced. It is for the continuous rendering. Here we can see a diagram for burial in a modern technique for disposal of the dead animals. It can have a separate enclosure with plastic vinyl, and then the animals are kept and it is covered with soil, and during decomposition all the gases will come out, and there will be the accumulation of liquid kind of things, that is the leachate, and that can go up through a purified leachate system. So this is a modern system for disposal of the carcasses by specific techniques. So now we are at the end of today's lecture. The topic was disposal of condemned carcasses, especially those diseases which are highly contagious and infectious. They should be specifically disposed of. So here we have discussed about different methods like burying or composting or landfilling or rendering or incineration. So in case of modern abattoir, there should be a high-tech facility for rendering, especially dry rendering. Here all the dead animals and condemned materials can be collected and crushed, and then it will be processed in a rendering machine, and it becomes sterilized and safe. And finally it is separated from the liquid oil and the solid material. The oil is separately stored, purified, and goes for industrial use, and the solid part, further fat, is extracted and dried and made into meals. Whereas some of the very serious cases of pathogens like anthrax, etc., it should be buried with proper care, as I have discussed earlier. Or nowadays there are high-tech incinerator where everything will be burnt at a more than 1000 degrees Celsius and very safe. When such facilities are not available, we can do simple burying or simple open air burning, and if there is enough space, sometime we can go for natural decomposition. So this is briefly about this today's topic. Thank you.